It felt like they'd been at the hospital for days, but it had been less than 13 hours. While Jude sat at Zach's bedside, news of the accident spread through Pine Island. By early evening, the phone calls had begun. Jude answered the first few, eager to have something to do, to think about beside her loss. But within seconds, she knew it had been a terrible mistake. Even as she listened to murmurs of support, she heard the relief in other people's voices, the immense gratitude that it wasn't their child who had died. She heard, "I'm so sorry," until she despised those words as she had never despised anything in her life. And she discovered an anger in her soul that was new, toxic. Finally, she turned off her phone and buried it in her purse and let Miles handle the condolences. She drank so much coffee she felt jittery, a racehorse at the gate with no race to run. A mother of twins who only had one child. She paced the hallways, walked up and down the bright corridors, seeing nothing. She couldn't sit by Zach anymore, couldn't talk to Miles, couldn't go see Mia. Her existence was defined by that which she couldn't do or have. So she kept moving, sobbing on and off, clutching wads of Kleenex that turned into soggy gray lumps in her hand. "Jude!" She heard her name as if from a distance and looked up, disoriented. Where was she? Molly was in front of her, holding an overnight bag clutched to her stomach. Without makeup on, dressed in pink juicy sweatpants and a white cardigan, with her white hair a spiky mess, she looked as ruined as Jude felt inside. Molly moved toward her awkwardly, let the bag thump to the floor between them. She kicked it aside and took Jude in her arms. When Molly began to cry, Jude felt as if she were floating away, disappearing. Only her friend's embrace kept her in this corridor at all. "I'm so—" "Don't say it," Jude said, easing out of Molly's arms. "Please." Her eyes felt painfully dry, sandpapery, and yet her vision was blurred. She saw now where she was, near the entrance to the waiting room. Molly tried gamely to smile, but it didn't work. "I brought you some clothes, toothbrush, whatever I could think of." Jude nodded. The last thing in the world she wanted was to stand here, pretending she wasn't shattered inside. But she couldn't make herself move either. Just down the hall, in the waiting room, she saw the crowd of women sitting together, watching Jude from a safe distance. They were women she knew from the island, women with whom she'd chaired committees, played tennis, had lunch, women with whom she'd shared both motherhood and friendship, neighbors, friends, acquaintances. They'd heard about the accident and come to help in whatever way they could, the modern equivalent of a quilting bee. In hard times, these women came together to help one another. Jude knew all of this because she was one of them. If someone else's child had been killed, Jude would have put everything else aside and come to offer help. They needed to support her, Jude could see that, but she couldn't seem to care about it. How could she make them understand that the woman they knew was gone? She wasn't the woman she'd befriended them anymore. She wasn't the durable woman she had always imagined herself to be. She wasn't courageous. If she'd been a soldier in wartime, there would be no hill charge led by her. She wouldn't throw her body on a grenade. Rather, she froze. There was no better word for it. All the strength she had, and it was a slippery thing, her strength, as small as a guppy and as hard to hold, she used to control her emotions. She didn't see how she could accept sympathy or make other people feel included. It took everything she had inside to pretend to be handling this. "They're here for you, Jude," Molly said. "We all are. What can we do to help?" Help. It was what women did for one another, even when there was no way to accomplish it. She took a deep breath and tried to straighten her shoulders. The attempt was a dismal failure, and she ended up rounded again, a woman curling up inside like a thin strip of wood. Still, she clutched Molly's hand and moved forward, one step at a time. The women in the waiting room rose as one, an audience getting to its feet. Jude moved into their midst, let them surround her, hold her. She wished they wouldn't cry, but they did, and their tears kept hers at bay. Jude stayed as long as she could, engulfed by the women who'd defined her for years, feeling desperately alone. As soon as possible, she got back to her feet, shaky now, more vulnerable than before, and ran back to the quiet in Zach's room. For the next 20 hours, she rarely ventured into the hallway again. She knew people were out there, hovering and drifting and whispering, Molly and her husband, Tim, and several of their island neighbors, and her mother, but Jude didn't care. She and Zach sat together, both staring dully at the TV hanging from the ceiling, saying little. Mia's absence filled the antiseptic-scented air, and her loss was all either wanted to talk about, but neither had the strength to form such painful words, so they sat in silence. The only time they turned the channel was when the news came on. The media had picked up the story of the accident, and neither Jude nor Zach could stand to watch the coverage. Miles, thankfully, handled the influx of calls with a calm no comment. Finally, on Tuesday morning, the hospital discharged Zach. On the drive home, Miles kept up a steady stream of conversation. He was trying to go on, to merge into the lane of their new existence, but neither Jude nor Zach could go there with him. Each of Miles's attempts landed in the big empty back seat of the Escalade, and he eventually gave up, turning on the radio instead. Pine Island teen killed. Jude snapped it off, and the silence returned. She slumped in her leather seat with the heat cranked high enough to warm her frozen core, staring dully out the window as the ferry pulled into port. She was so mired in grief that she hardly saw the familiar island landscape until all at once she recognized her surroundings. Miles had turned on Night Road. She gave a gasp of recognition. Miles! Shit, he said. Habit. The trees on either side of them were giants that blotted out the struggling mid-June sun. Deep shadows lay banked on either side. High in one of the branches, a lone eagle perched proudly, watching something far below. They turned a hairpin corner, and there it was, the scene of the accident. Twin skid marks scarred the gray asphalt. A tree was cracked, half of it fallen aside. At its base, a memorial had sprung up. "Oh, man," Zach said from the back seat. Jude wanted to look away, but she couldn't. The ravine between the road and the broken tree was strewn with bouquets of flowers, stuffed animals, high school pennants, and photos of Mia. Parked along the side of the road was a van with a satellite disc perched on top, a local news van's. Jude knew what she'd see on the evening news tonight. Images of teenagers, kids she'd known since they had gaps in their teeth, looking haggard and drawn now, older, crying about Mia's death, laying mementos of her short life on the ground, holding lit votives in small glass jars. And what would happen to all those stuffed animals that had been put here? Fall would come and rain would pound the color out of everything, and this place would become another ragged reminder of their loss. Less than a mile, she thought, as Miles turned onto their gravel driveway. Mia died less than a mile from home. They could have walked. At the front door was another shrine. Friends and neighbors had layered the entrance with flowers. When Jude got out of the car, she smelled the sweet, heady fragrance, but already some were fading, their petals beginning to curl and turn brown. "Get rid of it," she said to Miles. He looked at her. "They're beautiful, Jude. It means—" "I know what it means," she said tightly. "People loved our daughter, a girl who is never coming home again." Her voice caught, and she hated how overwhelmed she felt when she looked at these flowers. She would have done the same thing for a neighbor's child, and she would have cried as she bought the flowers and placed them here. She would have felt an incredible sense of loss, and the sharp, sweet relief of knowing that her kids were okay. "They'll just die," she finally said. Miles pulled her into his arms. Zach came up beside them, leaned into Jude. She wanted to put her arm around him, but she felt paralyzed. It took concentration just to breathe with the cloying scent of all these flowers. "She liked white roses," Zach said. At that, the grief came at Jude again. How had she not known that about Mia? All those hours she'd spent in her garden, and never had she planted a single creamy white rose. She looked down at the flowers by her front door. There were dahlias, zinnias, and roses of every color except white. In a burst of anger, she scooped up all the flowers and carried them over to the woods behind the garage and threw them into the trees. She was just about to turn away when something white caught her eye. An unopened rosebud lay on the top of the flowery heap, its petals as rich in color as fresh cream. Jude scrambled through the brush, feeling stinging nettles lash across her face and hands, burning her skin, but she didn't care. She picked up the lone rosebud, clutching it in one shaking hand, feeling the prick of thorns. "Jude?" She heard Miles's voice coming at her. Clutching the single stem, she looked back at him. In the harsh sunlight, he looked slight suddenly, fragile. She saw the hollows of his cheeks and the spidery look of his fingers as he reached out. He took her hand and helped her to her feet. She stared up into the gray eyes that had been her only real home, and all she saw now was emptiness. They walked into their home, which was bright with lights and sweltering hot. The first thing Jude saw was a shamrock green sweater hanging from the antique hall tree by the door. How many times had she asked Mia to take it up to her room? "I will, Madre, honest, tomorrow." She let go of her husband's arm. She was about to reach for the sweater when she heard her mother's voice. "Judith?" Her mother stood in the entryway, dressed in an elegant steel-gray fitted blouse and black pants. She reached out, pulled Jude into her arms. Jude wished there was comfort in this embrace, but it was as cold and rote as everything else between them. She drew back as quickly as she could, crossing her arms. She was freezing cold suddenly, even though the house was warm. "I've put the food away," Mother said. "Your friends have been so supportive. I've never seen so many foil-wrapped casseroles in my life. I've put everything in the freezer, marked and dated. I have also made all the funeral arrangements." Jude looked up sharply. "How dare you?" Her mother looked worriedly at her. "I was trying to help." "We are not having a funeral," Jude said. "No funeral?" Miles said. "Remember your parents' funerals? And I remember my father's. No way I'm going through that for Mia. We're not religious. I'm not going to—" "You don't need to be religious to have a funeral, Judith," her mother said. "God will be there—" "Don't you dare mention God to me. He let her die." She saw her mother pale, draw back, and just like that, Jude lost her hold on anger. Without it, she felt so exhausted she could hardly stand. "I need to sleep," she said. Clutching Mia's purse and the single white rose, she turned her back on her family and stumbled down the hallway to her bedroom, collapsing on her bed. Mia's purse spilled out. The contents lay scattered across the expensive sheets. Jude lay on her side, snuggled up to her pillow, staring down at Mia's fangs. The pink juicy couture wallet that had been last year's Christmas gift, a tube of lip gloss, a bent and mangled tampon, a crumpled up $20 bill, a half-empty pack of gum, and a used movie ticket. Inside the wallet was a picture of Zach, Mia, and Lexi taken at senior prom. Forgive me? If only she'd hugged Mia right then, told her that she loved her, or if she'd said no to the party, or taught her kids that alcohol was dangerous even though parties were fun, or insisted on driving them, or not bought the kids a car, or— The list of her regrets grew too heavy, weighed her down. She closed her eyes. Behind her, she heard her bedroom door open and close. Miles came toward the bed. She could sense that it was him, but she couldn't turn toward him or open her eyes. He slipped into bed, pulled her against him. She felt him stroke her hair, and she shivered at his touch, freezing again. "Your mother left." She said something about knowing when she wasn't welcome, which of course is completely untrue. "And Zach? That's the first time you've asked about him." "Don't tell me how to grieve, Miles. I'm doing the best I can." "I know." "I never planted a white rose," she said quietly. "Why didn't I ask Mia what flowers she liked? Why didn't I know?" He stroked her hair. "We can't do this," he said. "Going through our whole lives, tilling it up, looking for mistakes. It'll kill us." She nodded, feeling tears start again. God, she was already tired of crying, and it hadn't even started. She'd been without her daughter for less than 3 days. The rest of her life stretched out before her like the Gobi Desert. "We have to have a funeral," Miles said softly. "Because it's the thing to do?" Because Jake and I need it. Jude pressed her face into the pillow, blotting her tears. Okay, she said, overcome again by all of it. I'm going to sleep now, she said, closing her eyes. Miles left the room and closed the door behind him. Seattle Times. Local teen killed in drunk driving accident. An 18-year-old Pine Island girl was killed early yesterday morning in a single car crash on Knight Road. Mia Faraday, a Pine Island High School senior, was thrown out of a Ford Mustang when it hit a tree, authorities said. The driver, 18-year-old Lexi Baill of Port George, was reportedly intoxicated at the time. Another passenger, Zachary Faraday, was also injured in the incident. Pine Island police officer Roy Avery is tired of delivering bad news to parents of local teens. He pointed out that before this most recent fatal crash, an accident in another part of the county killed a 16-year-old Woodside girl. Both wrecks happened on dark, twisty two-lane roads, and both young drivers had been drinking, Officer Avery said. We have to stop these teens from partying. That's all there is to it. The consequences are tragic. Every year there's a grad party accident. This year, someone was killed. The local chapter of MADD has taken a strong interest in this incident. President Norma Alice Davidson demanded publicly that charges be brought against this young driver. Only stiffer penalties will make teens take notice of the danger, she said. Prosecuting attorney Uslan declined to comment about whether Ms. Baill would be charged with DUI vehicular homicide. A memorial service for Mia Faraday will take place Wednesday at Grace Church on Pine Island at 4 p.m. All over Pine Island, there were reminders of Mia's death. On the high school reader board, "We miss you, Mia." On the movie marquee, "In memory of Mia." There were signs in storefronts and taped to car windows. But those reminders weren't the worst of it. Now, as Lexi walked up Main Street, she was bombarded by memories. She and Mia had painted ceramic platters together there, at the Dancing Brush. They'd bought designer jelly beans at the candy store and books at the bookstores. Books. That was what had brought them together in the first place. Two lonely girls who, before each other, experienced the world from afar, through words. Can I sit here? Social suicide. Eva handed Lexi a wad of toilet paper. You're crying. Am I? She wiped her eyes, surprised to find how hard she was crying. Eva patched her arm gently. Here we are. The lawyer's office was just off Main Street, tucked back in a tree-lined quad that housed a yarn shop, an antique shop, and an art gallery. The small, squat brick building had big windows and a bright blue door that read, Scott Jacobs, Attorney at Law. Lexi followed Eva into the office. The main room held a big oak desk, 3 plastic chairs, and a framed black and white photograph of driftwood on a beach. A tired-looking older woman with black horn-rimmed glasses sat behind the desk. You must be Alexa, the receptionist said. I'm Bea. Hi, Bea. This is my Aunt Eva. You both can go in now. You ready for this? Eva whispered to Lexi. Lexi shook her head. Me either. They walked down a narrow hallway, past a conference-type room. At the back office, a youngish man sat behind a big glass desk. At their approach, he rose. In a crumpled blue suit and overwashed pink shirt, he looked like the kind of attorney they could afford, and, of course, they couldn't really afford him. His hair was unstylishly long, a little tousled, and he needed a shave, but his brown eyes were kind and compassionate. Hello, Lexi said, moving forward to shake his plump, slightly damp hand. Lexi sat down in one of the 2 upholstered chairs that faced the desk. Beside her, Eva put her purse on the floor and sat down in the other chair. Thank you for agreeing to see us, her aunt said. Mr. Jacobs steepled his pale fingers and studied Lexi. You're in a bad spot, Miss Baill. Your accident has sparked a firestorm around here. The regional MAD organization is fired up. They want an example made of you. What does that mean? Lexi asked. They think that if you go to prison, kids will get the message, and a lot of people want to see this message go out to kids. Prison? Prison? Lexi said, feeling the floor drop out from under her. But she's a kid, Eva said. Actually, she's 18. That makes her an adult, and she was legally intoxicated at the time of the accident. Of course, at her age, .0 is the legal limit. They send girls to prison for an accident like this? Eva asked. When alcohol is involved, they can. They can also go for probation and community service. There are a lot of potential outcomes here, and a lot of choices along the way. That's what I'm for, to help guide and defend Lexi. So what should I do? Lexi said quietly. She was shaken to her core by the whole idea of this. She'd seen what happened as an accident. It was a crime, though. Now she saw how much more she had to face, and it terrified her. We fight. Fight? But I did it. I drove drunk. It wasn't your car, and you were the least intoxicated of the three, Scott said. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out what happened. You thought you were the safest among you to drive, and jurors tend to drink. They'll know a thing like this can happen to anyone. I'll need to hire an investigator, but you'll definitely plead not guilty. Last year, I defended a man who killed 2 people in a similar situation, and I got him acquitted. It's not over till it's over. Acquitted, not guilty. How could Lexi ever face Zach in court and say she wasn't guilty? How could she face anyone on the island and say that? But she's dead. I can't pretend I didn't do anything wrong. Prison isn't the answer, Lexi. Believe me. He collated some papers on his desk, thumped them into a packet. Here's the plan. You're going to speak to high school kids and share your story. I'll set something up for you. It'll look good if you take responsibility for your actions. Show the community and the media that you can send a message to other teens without going to prison. He gave her a sad smile. I know your whole story, Lexi. People will respond to what you've been through. What do you mean? He opened a file and looked at it. Your mother, Lexi Baill, was first arrested in 1986 when you were 3 months old. You lived with 7 foster families in your first 14 years. Every time your mom got out of rehab or jail, she came back for you. The courts kept giving her chances. He looked up. You've had a hard life, Lexi, and you were with your mom when she overdosed. Lexi swallowed hard. It was a memory she tried never to remember. Yes. Jurors will have sympathy for you. Trust me to take care of you, okay? How much do you cost? Aunt Eva asked. I'm a one-man shop, Eva. I can't afford to take this case pro bono, and I won't lie to you. It'll be expensive, but I'll save you money wherever I can. Lexi felt sick at that. Her aunt already worked 50 hours a week to pay the ordinary bills. How was she going to pay for this, too? I have some savings, Eva said. My husband's life insurance. No, Lexi said. That's your retirement. Don't argue with me, Alexa, Eva said. It's my money. I'll spend it my way. Scott reached for a couple of business cards and handed them across the desk. If the police or the prosecuting attorney's office or another attorney contact you, say nothing and give them my number. Nothing. I can't stress that enough. I will tell them that I'm representing you and find out what I can. If we're lucky, they'll decide not to charge you. If we're not, he shrugged. Eva stood up. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Call me Scott, please. And don't you worry, Lexi, we'll keep you out of prison. Are you sure about going today? Eva said. Lexi stood at the window, staring outside. How can I not go to my best friend's funeral? It won't be easy. I killed her, Lexi said quietly. I don't expect it to be easy. She didn't think anything would ever be easy again, but she had to do this. She had to stand there, ashamed, and let her friends see what came from drinking and driving, and she had to see Zach one more time and his parents and tell them how sorry she was. She went into the bathroom and sat on the beige fiberglass rim of the bathtub. She closed her eyes and felt Mia beside her. Do you want to come to my house after school? I'll meet you at the flagpole. She just came right up to me and asked if she could sit down. Move over, Zach Attack. You're hugging my best friend. Lexi cried until there was nothing left inside of her. Then, drawing in a deep breath, she exhaled slowly and got to her feet. Feeling hollow and shaky, she dressed in a pair of plain black pants, black flats, and a short-sleeved blue Angora sweater that Mia had bought for her. In the living room, she found Ava standing by the kitchen table, dressed in all black, looking worried. She was gulping coffee. It was what she did when she was nervous. That was one of the things Lexi knew about Ava. Whenever she missed smoking, she drank black coffee until the craving passed. This is a bad idea. What if there are reporters there? I have to face them sooner or later. Ava gave her one last worried look, started to say something, and changed her mind. Lips thinned by those unspoken words, she walked out of the double-wide and led the way to the old Ford Fairline. They drove onto the island in silence. As they passed the high school, Lexi noticed the reader board. Now it read, Mia Faraday Memorial, Grace Church, 4 p.m. today. Grad, Saturday, at 1 p.m. The parking lot in front of the church was full. Lexi let out her breath. Ava pulled into an empty spot and parked. Lexi got out of the car. As she moved forward, her broken arm started to ache and nerves fluttered in the pit of her stomach. You can do it, Ava said, taking hold of Lexi's good arm. Inside, the church was full of teenagers and parents and teachers. Up by the altar was a poster of Mia in her costume from Once Upon a Mattress. In the beaded blue bodice, with stage makeup emphasizing her green eyes, she looked radiant and beautiful, a young woman with a bright future. Lexi stumbled. Ava kept her going. Lexi heard people whisper as she passed. That's Lexi Baill. Surprise. If she'd been a better friend? Poor thing. Some nerve. Hey, Lexi, you want to sit here? Lexi! She turned slowly, saw Zach's ex-girlfriend, Amanda Martin, sitting in the pew to her right. Amanda scooted sideways, made her mom and dad scrunch together to make room. Lexi sat down by Amanda. She looked into the girl's sad eyes, and suddenly they were both crying. They hadn't been friends in high school, but it didn't matter now. All that stuff just fell away. It totally wasn't your fault, Amanda said. I don't care what people say. Lexi was surprised by how much that meant to her. Thanks. Before Amanda could say anything else, the service began. The priest said Mia's name, and every high school girl in the church burst into tears, and more than a few boys joined in. The priest's words painted a picture of a happy 18-year-old girl who was almost Mia, and yet not quite. He didn't say that she snored when she lay on her back, or that she moved her lips when she read, or that she liked to hold her best friend's hand while they walked through the mall. His words she could withstand. It was the slideshow of Mia's life that devastated her. Mia in a pink tutu, her arms circled above her head. Mia holding a Captain Hook action figure, grinning, holding Zach's hand as they stood in the cold ocean water, grimacing. The last picture was of Mia alone, wearing a crazy tie-dyed t-shirt and cutoffs, smiling for the camera, giving the world a thumbs up. Lexi closed her eyes, sobbing now. Music began to play. It was not the right music. Mia wouldn't have liked the droning, solemn chords, and somehow that hurt most of all. Whoever had picked the music hadn't thought of Mia. It should have been a Disney song, something that would have gotten Mia on her feet and made her sing along with her hairbrush as a microphone. Sing with me, Lexter. We could be in a band. And Zach laughing, saying, No more, Mia. Dogs are starting to howl. Lexi wanted to clamp her hands over her ears, but the words came from inside of her, memories blooming up and spilling over. Time to go, Lexi, Amanda said gently. Lexi opened her eyes. Thanks for letting me sit with you. You coming to graduation? Lexi shrugged. Had it only been 6 days ago she and Mia and Zach had been together in the gym practicing for graduation? I don't know. People moved into the aisle, streamed toward the double doors. Lexi felt their gazes on her. Faces frowned in recognition as they passed her. Parents looked judgmental. Kids looked sad and sympathetic. Finally, she saw the family. They sat in the front pew, still and stiff and dressed in black. People paused to offer condolences as they passed. Lexi moved toward them, unable to stop herself. She was going against the flow. Mourners stared at her, frowned, moved out of her way. In the front row, the Faradays rose in unison and turned. Neither Jude nor Zach acknowledged her. They just stared, dull-eyed, their faces streaked with tears. Lexi had practiced what she would say to them 100 times, but now, faced with the magnitude of their loss and her guilt, she couldn't even open her mouth. The whole family turned away from her and walked to the church's side door. Lexi felt Eva come up beside her. She sagged into her aunt, giving up the strength that had taken to come here. "No one blames him," Eva said bitterly. "It's not right. He wasn't driving. He should have been. What good is it to make a promise and then ignore it? He should be blamed too." I remembered how he'd looked at her in the hospital. The green eyes I loved so much had been darkened by more than grief. I'd seen guilt there too, as deep as my own. He blames himself. "That's not enough," Eva said firmly. "Let's go." She took Lexi by the arm and led her out of the church. Lexi could hear people whispering about her, blaming her. If she'd been less culpable, she might have agreed with Eva, maybe been pissed at Zach. But any other blame was less than hers. That was all there was. Zach had failed to live up to a promise. She made the deadly decision herself. Guilt and remorse filled her to the brim. There was no room for anger, too. Zach screwed up. Lexi did far, far worse. Someone should have told me it was a bad idea to go to the funeral. If someone had, I'm sure you would have listened, Eva said. Lexi wiped her eyes. Of course. Jude sat huddled in the limousine's dark interior. Outside, it began to rain. Drops landed on the roof like infant heartbeats. She was so deep in grief that when the car door opened, letting in a blast of gray and yellow light, it stung her tear-burned eyes and she looked around, disoriented. "We're here," the driver said, standing by the open door. He was a slash of more black in the rain, a slanted shadow beneath an umbrella. Behind him, Molly and Tim stood huddled with their grown children. "Come along, Zachary," her mother said, herding him out of the limousine. Miles slid past Jude and got out of the car. Then he held out his hand for her. "Jude." "Go on," she said, glad that he couldn't see her eyes behind the dark sunglasses she wore. "I'll catch up with you," Miles said to Caroline, who no doubt nodded and walked briskly away, making sure Zach stood up straight and didn't cry. That was what Jude remembered about her father's funeral. Not crying. No one had cried for him. Her mother simply hadn't allowed it. She'd treated grief like a malignancy of some kind. A few snips, a few stitches, and you were good as new. "You can't not go," Miles said, squatting beside the car. Rain pelted his face, straightened his hair. "Watch me." "Jude," he sighed. It was their family sound now. Before, it had been laughter. Now, it was the sigh. "Don't you think I want to be strong enough for this?" she said. "I'm ashamed of myself, and I want to be there. I just can't. I'm not ready to watch her lower her into the ground, and I'm sure as hell not ready to stand next to you while you let go of pink balloons." Her voice broke on that. "Like she's up in some heaven waiting to catch them." "Jude," he said tiredly, and she understood. He wanted her to believe that Mia was in a better place, but Jude couldn't do it. She knew what it was costing her, this inability of hers to be strong, but she couldn't do it. There was simply nothing of her left. Try as hard as she might, and honestly, it exhausted her to even try, she couldn't seem to be present, not even as a mother. Zach knew she wasn't herself anymore. He treated her as if she were made of spun sugar. He approached her warily, making sure never to say anything about Mia. But sometimes, when she said goodnight to him, she saw the need in his eyes, the naked pain, and it hurt her to her bones. She'd reach for him in those moments, but he wasn't fooled. He knew it wasn't her touch, that somehow she wasn't there. And when she walked away, she saw that he looked more broken after she'd soothed him than before. "You're breaking Zach's heart. I know you know that. He needs you today." Jude swallowed hard. "I know, and I can't do it. I can't stand there. Did you see how they all looked at us at the funeral? All I could think was that I hated them all, with their healthy kids. I look at people who aren't us, and I hate them.
And I look at Zach, and all I see is the emptiness beside him. He's half a person, and we all know it. And sometimes I can't help blaming him. If he hadn't gotten drunk, she drew in a sharp breath, or if I hadn't let him go that night. You can't keep this up. It's been less than a week, she snapped. And if you tell me time will heal this, I swear to God I'll kill you in your sleep. Miles stared at her for a long time and then pulled her into his arms. I love you, Jude, he whispered into her ear, and against her best intentions, she started to cry. She loved him too, and she loved Zach. It was inside her somewhere, she just couldn't reach it. I'll tell her goodbye for you. She heard the car door click shut, and she was alone again, thankfully. For a long while, she sat there in the darkness, listening to the rain on the roof, trying not to think about anything, but her daughter's presence was everywhere, in every breath, every sigh, every blink of the eye. Finally, furtively, she reached into her small black purse and pulled out Mia's cell phone. With a quick glance around, she flipped it open and listened to Mia's outgoing message. Hi, you've reached Mia. I'm way too busy to talk now, but if you'll leave me a message, I'll totally get back to you. Jude listened to it over and over again, sometimes talking to her daughter, sometimes crying, sometimes just listening. She was so caught up in reaching Mia that she gasped when the door opened. She snapped the phone shut and shoved it in her purse as Zach climbed into the limousine. His eyes were red and swollen. Jude slid over to him and took his hand. She hated the way he looked at her, surprised by her touch, and she wanted to offer words of comfort, but she had none. She and Zach and Miles slumped together on the long ride home. Her mother sat opposite them, her hands clasped in her lap, her beautiful eyes glistening with tears that never fell. Jude was surprised by that sign of emotion, of loss. Only a week ago, the sight of her mother's improbable tears would have amazed Jude, made her want to reach out. Now, she didn't care. Her own pain crowded out everyone else's. It was a pathetic, humiliating truth, but a truth nonetheless. At the house, Jude got out of the car and walked to the front door alone. All she wanted to do now was sleep. She must have said it out loud because she heard her brother say, "That's a good idea. Sleep will help." Jude seemed to awaken at that. "Will it, Mother? Really?" Her mother patted Jude's wrist. It was a light touch, barely there before it was gone. "God doesn't give us more than we can bear. You're stronger than this, Judith." Anger blindsided Jude. It was one of her new emotions. She had never been angry before, not really, but it was always with her now, as much a part of her as the shape of her face and the color of her skin. It took tremendous effort not to show it all the time. She spun away from her mother before she said something she would regret and headed into the house. In the entryway, she came to a halt. "Where's Mia's sweater?" "What?" Zach said, coming up behind her. "Mia's green sweater, it was hanging right here." Jude's anger mutated into panic. "It's in the laundry. I was going to wash it along with—" Jude ran to the laundry room and pawed through the pile of dirty clothes until she found Mia's sweater. Bringing it to her face, she pressed the soft wool to her nose, inhaling Mia's scent. Her tears dampened the fabric, but she didn't care. Ignoring her family stares, she stumbled into her bedroom and slammed the door shut behind her, collapsing on the bed. Finally, after what felt like hours, she heard her bedroom door open. "Hey," Molly said from the doorway. She stood there, looking sad and uncertain in a chic black dress with a cinch belt, wringing her hands together. Her white hair was a mess, pulled back from her face in a thin headband. A black grow outline spread along her forehead. "Can I come in? Could I stop you?" "No." Jude crawled to a sit, leaned back against her silk-upholstered headboard. Molly got up onto the big bed and took Jude into her arms, holding her as if she were a child. Jude didn't mean to cry again, but she couldn't help it. "I used to think I was strong," Jude whispered. "You are strong," Molly said, tucking a damp strand of hair behind Jude's ear. "No," she said, pulling back. "I have no idea who I am anymore." It was true. All of this had shown her the truth of her soul. She was weak, fragile, not the woman she'd imagined herself to be at all. Or maybe that wasn't true. Maybe she knew now what she hadn't known before. She wasn't kind and caring and compassionate and even-tempered. She was angry and weak and even a little vindictive. Most of all, she was a bad mother. Everything lately pissed her off. Sunshine, healthy children, parents who complained about their kids. Lexi. Jude suddenly didn't want to be touched. She pulled out of Molly's arms and slumped back against the headboard. She wasn't wearing her seatbelt. She said it quietly, afraid. It had only been a few days, and already Jude had learned that people didn't want to hear about Mia. How was she supposed to stop talking about her daughter? But just the mention of her name could send people running for the door. "Tell me," Molly said, holding her hand, settling in beside her. "Thanks," Jude said. "No one wants to hear about her. I'll listen to anything you want to say." Jude turned to her. She always wore her seatbelt. She drew in a shaking breath and reached over into the nightstand for tissues. A mistake. She saw that instantly. Inside the drawer, she saw a small blue velvet ring box sitting beside a pair of Costco reading glasses. Knowing she shouldn't touch it, she took it out, flipped it open. "What's that?" "Mia's graduation present." Molly was silent for a moment. "It's beautiful." "I was going to take her shopping with me for the stone. A girls' day. Maybe a mani-pedi when we were done." On that, Jude's resolve cracked, and she started to cry. "Oh, Jude," Molly said, hugging her again. Jude should have felt enveloped by her friend's love, but she couldn't feel anything at all. Not then, as she stared down at this beautiful, unfinished ring with gaping, empty prongs.